right. Good morning, Facebook friends. It is Tuesday morning here enjoying some coffee with author Felicia Darling. A quick sort of update, really quick. I have been working hard on getting the podcast up and going, and I'm super excited to share that it will actually finally be live on this Sunday, the 25th. So the first 3 episodes will be available, and then lots more to come after that. So definitely stay tuned and check back for announcements about that. And today we are going to be recording a podcast episode for author Felicia Darling, who will be a guest on the podcast. And let's go ahead and get started with that.
Thanks. Hey, Allison, so on your podcast, if people want to see the video, they just go to your podcast and there's a link there to go back and see the videos, right?
Yes. So the podcast will be available everywhere where there are podcasts, but it'll also be available on my website, AllisonLovesMath.com. And then, yes, it should be in the show notes for everything. There will be a link back to the Facebook video, so anyone who wants to watch the video can do that.
Oh, great. Thanks.
Yeah, it should be fun. So, all right. Let's see. Okay. Let's get started. 3, 2, 1. Good morning. Welcome to the Allison Loves Math podcast. I'm so excited to have today's guest, Felicia Darling, with us.
Hi.
Felicia is a first-generation college student, researcher, educator, author who has taught math for almost 30 years at both the secondary and college levels. She has a PhD in math education from Stanford University and has a Fulbright Scholar for her research in Mexico. She is the author of Teachin It, Breakout Moves That Break Down Barriers for Community College Students, published by the Teachers College Press, and she's the author of the upcoming Ripple Effect, Becoming the Change We All Need. Currently, she teaches math at Santa Rosa Junior College. Good morning, Felicia. It's so awesome to have you here.
Hey, how you doing?
Great.
I loved your introduction. I loved your voice. You seem like you're a professional interviewer on television. It's really cool.
Oh, thank you so much. I feel as not professional as you could be, but I appreciate that so much.
That's part of your charm as well, that you're so authentic too, I think.
Thank you. Oh, all right. Well, let's get started. I think you have a fascinating background that's led up to you teaching math and getting your PhD from Stanford, and writing this really amazing book. I know one of the reasons why I reached out to you a long time ago, when we first connected, was this book, Teachin It, which just as a community college instructor, it has so many helpful strategies and advice and perspectives in it. So can you just start by telling us a little bit about you and your background and how you came to do all these amazing things?
Yeah. I have kind of a little set story that I tell because I think people should ask themselves why they care about doing the kind of work they do at the community college. So I kind of answered this question: why do I care about doing this work? Why did I write the book? Because why we care is both personal and powerful. And I recommend, if you're in the middle of the semester, you're feeling tired, which many of us are, to ask yourself why you do this work. You'll find that it really bolsters makes you a little more buoyant, right? And inspires you. And so when I was 17, I wanted a doctorate. So I wanted a doctorate for a lot of years, but I had come from a family with a lot of issues, a lot of instability, domestic violence. I'm first gen. None of my 5 siblings, nor either of my parents went to college. And so I found community college when I was 24, and I literally found it. I was like, what is this thing? Can this help me go to college? I was kind of lost. I had a lot of issues, mental health issues, some substance abuse issues. I came from that kind of a background. And I was homeless quite a bit. And as part of that homelessness, I survived 2 armed sexual assaults, among other things, right? So I struggled quite a bit. Even as a young adult, I lived in poverty. My daughter was born in a house without plumbing or electricity. In fact, if I had to use the bathroom, I had to go outside when it was 40 degrees below zero with my eyelashes freezing together in the northeast of the United States. But I persisted, and I got my PhD in math ed from Stanford at age 55. And I don't know if you know about poverty research, but it takes about 20 years to overcome poverty. And that's if nothing goes wrong, right? And something always goes wrong when you lack that socio-economic safety net. So this is the first decade of my life, really, where I have not faced housing insecurity or homelessness. And so I'm still answering the question of why I do this work. Why did I write that book? Why do I love teaching at the community college level? I'm going to continue with that. So many of our students have faced early childhood trauma or poverty. Many of my students are formerly incarcerated. They've overcome substance abuse issues. They made this incredible journey to be in the classroom. And I thought to myself, if I had to make the journey that I made from community college to PhD while also facing systemic discrimination every day because I was Black or I had a disability or I was from the LGBTQ plus community, I'm not really sure I'd have a PhD today. In fact, I'm not even sure I'd be alive today. And so I had to sit with that, like, oh my gosh, there's students who have my story and then they face systemic discrimination. So I do this work, I wrote this book because I want students who face systemic discrimination and inequity every day to get what they need in my classroom to be successful. I want them to feel like their voices are heard in my classroom, they're included. I want them to feel like their perspectives are valued. I want them to feel like they belong, because research is clear on this. Students who feel like they belong in college stay in college. So that's why I do the work that I do, and that's part of my story. And I really recommend that you kind of tell your own story to yourself about why you love teaching at community college, especially now when we're all so tired. We're all worn out, we really are. In California, we have the extra benefit of the fires. There's, of course, the civil unrest that there is for everyone, and then the pandemic. And telling yourself your story, why, answering that question, why you do that work, can really help you feel like, okay, I can get up and come back into the classroom and support these students who need so much extra support right now than they did before the pandemic, before we went to emergency remote instruction. So that's why I do the work. That's a little bit about my story, Allison. Well, thanks for asking.
I love that. It's such a, you are such an amazing role model for your students and for instructors, and it's such a moving story. So tell us a little bit about Teachin It.
Yeah, so Teachin It is a book that I interviewed a bunch of instructors at community college, at Santa Rosa Junior College, where I teach. It has some of my stories. It draws from my own research in Mexico. It draws from a lot of research and my work with Joe Bowler. But it's not just for math instructors, it's for all instructors. And it focuses on this inquiry-based group learning, layering in of college skills, inclusive instruction, exploring your own implicit bias, basically finding ways to have more inclusive, engaging instruction. And lately, I've, of course, like everyone, been focusing on how do you take the strengths of your teaching, the things that you think work, and transitioning them online. Yes. So now I'm focusing on, in my classrooms anyway, building that community of powerful learners online in live and on-demand classes, and still bringing in speakers, doing in-reach, bringing in psych people on the psych services, the academic counselors, bringing them into the classroom in meaningful ways, and just, helping students to feel valued and give them reasons to come back to class, doing that inquiry-based group learning in class, whether you're doing live or on demand, increasing a lot of teacher to student interactions that are meaningful, and also student to student interactions that are meaningful. So that's what I'm focusing on now, right? Yeah. Is taking the ideas from the book and working with different colleges across the country, and like, how can you do that? How can you take the ideas and Teachin It and now kind of translate them into online instruction,
into our new world that is online.
Yeah, into our new world. And I wouldn't say that it's harder, but it's different. And so if you're not used to that, it's a steep learning curve for sure.
Right. So what are is there anything that you found that, you tried and you go, oh yes, that made things easier and better online? What are a couple of things that maybe can help some teachers?
Yeah, it's kind of the same thing, right? You have to find new ways to do checking for understanding. You have to increase those student-teacher interactions. Like, for example, using if you're doing live classes, using polls, using the chat. I use the whiteboard and students write. This is one advantage of Zoom in math is students can write on your whiteboard, right? So they're sharing their screen. So there's a lot more student voice in that way, which I really like. However, if you're teaching math and you're doing async or on-demand classes, in order to really reach the struggling students, you still have to do some of that live interaction stuff. I know you're interested in statistics. So a friend of mine at my college created, when we did emergency remote, he created the most amazing model of an on-demand async class in statistics. It was the best I'd ever seen. In fact, I took it because I was helping a student in that class. It's the best I've ever seen. But still, what he noticed was the students who were taking the co-rec class didn't do well in it. The students who were already in the stats class, they did great. I mean, it's an amazing class. Anybody who was in a certain place could really use that to learn statistics. But he did notice that this is when we went emergency remote in the spring, that the students who were taking the co-rec, students who maybe had a broader range of preparedness, they actually didn't do well. He actually had to spend an extra 20 hours a week doing some live contact with those students. Yeah. So it was really, really revealing that some students still need more of that face-to-face, even when you're doing an on-demand class. And as you know, math really lends itself more to the live classes because students need immediate clarification. Whereas, a writing class maybe has a longer learning arc. So, you can have student interactions by having them post on forums and then bringing their views that they write on the forum into a weekly email that you send out, right? There's different ways that you can incorporate student voice in a course that has kind of a longer learning arc. But with math, particularly for students who need that immediate clarification and that contact, they need more of the live piece. Even if it's an async class, they needed, in this case, more of the live pieces as well.
Absolutely.
So that's one piece of advice I would say is try to increase that live element, especially for students that you think might potentially drop out. Because students, I say this, students who are at risk for dropping out of class, it doesn't matter if you cover this or this, because they're just not going to be there. So you got to make sure that you improve retention by having that contact with them. Right. So yeah, and I would say this semester, I wouldn't necessarily do this if I was teaching long-term. I was teaching on an online course and there were choices. If people choose to take my online course instead of this is all they have, right. I wouldn't necessarily do this, but I think my biggest advice right now to people is build in flexibility, right? So I had to do, if students say, I can't make that deadline, I extend the deadline for everybody. I have been extending deadlines, giving that out like it's candy, right? Because they don't have any other choice. They didn't take this online course because they loved it. They didn't take this online course because they knew they had reliable internet. They don't know. So I build in a lot of flexibility, and I just watch. Do I need to drop the lowest grade? I would not normally do that online, but I think I could still consider this emergency remote instruction. And I also, on Canvas, is this great little feature that I go and I look, is an assignment coming up? Who doesn't have it in yet? And I remind them. It's a really easy way to remind people. That's just another way to keep in contact with students who might be running into trouble. Right. Even I teach a graduate course at San Jose State University in elementary math methods. Even those students are a little bit more in trouble this semester than last semester. Right? They're struggling a little bit more, and I've had to extend deadlines even in that class, which is very unusual. So that tells me that my community college students are also struggling with, internet access, just the balancing of having kids at home, that they're educating while they're going to school, while they're working. So a little empathy goes a long way right now.
Yes, definitely. I think, especially when we moved online in the spring, that was something that was a huge adjustment for me because I'd always been very, strict deadlines. Homework is due here, tests have to be taken here, and it was, it's one of those things where it's it has to be non-negotiable, otherwise everyone walks all over you. And so it was a very weird transition that really happened overnight. That really everything had to be flexible because everybody's job situation changed, their school situation, their work situation, family, and so the obstacles that everybody was up against, got bigger and changed drastically, overnight. And so definitely that, I think I ended up doing the same dropping a test also, and then extending all of the homework. And I even went
Yep.
past, I said, if you can't do it by the end of the semester, if we can create a plan to get it done over summer, you can do an incomplete and we can finish it. And
Yeah.
yeah,
And
a lot more of that than normal.
that's the problem though. So instructors are also under stress. So if you're an instructor who, to one of your big coping mechanisms is to get more controlling and get more focused on deadlines, this is a tough time for you because that's not helpful for the students. Yeah, and that's a big issue. Oh, another thing I wanted to mention, because you asked what are really useful, is I always have the attendance roster in front of me when I'm teaching, in case, Zoom is like, oh, if you have the PowerPoint, you can't see the students, that kind of thing. Right. So that I make sure I include every student in at least 2 classes. Like in an arc of 2 classes, I make sure I've called on every single student. And so that's a really good way to make sure everyone's included and they know that they'll be called on either to post in chat or to talk to you. And if you're doing discussion forums, same thing. I keep a track of whose forums I brought back into class, either if you're doing async, through an email, or if you're doing live back into class. So that those are two ways to keep, every single student's voice included in class. But yeah, it's all about empathy right now. I mean, but I know I was worried. I was like, they're going to walk all over me. And you still have to hold students accountable. So I told students, you know what, in this class, you have to have your videos on. But if you can't, please email me and let me know. And some people email me, they have bad internet connection. They're waiting for a computer. They share it with kids. But I had a student email me. She says, I'm not going to, I can't have my video on in class. I'm like, okay, tell me a little more about that. This is going through email. She goes, well, in the morning, I just can't get it together to look presentable at 8 a.m. And I said, that's not a good enough excuse, So you do have to like gently hold people accountable, because like you said, you don't want the 1 or 2 students who might be like, can't get it together to look presentable at 8. Well, they have to. That's part of it. That's part of what your expectation is, but gently, because you don't really know what the real reasons are sometimes. But yeah, it's definitely harder to navigate that because you have less information and people need more breaks. Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, I'm trying to think. In Teaching It, you talk quite a bit about strategies to help first generation college students, or students who are minorities, and you do talk, I think, a bit about how they're I forget some of the stats, but I know you talk about some of the statistics about rates. I'm totally
like retention, completion rates
and completion rates and stuff like that, and so I'm wondering if you have, I'm trying to think. I guess I'm wondering, if there are, teaching strategies, that in addition to sort of, being empathetic and reaching out to students, that might help some of our students that we see are being significantly more impacted by the pandemic and things like that right now.
Yeah, right. So students from lower income backgrounds, for different reasons, students from lower income backgrounds, students of color, Black students, students from LGBTQ plus community have lower rates of completing 4-year degrees. Some of that is just resources. Some of it is just a system that discriminates against them, right? So there's varying reasons. So then there's varying interventions that work. The inquiry-based group learning that's inclusive, obviously, helps to disrupt systemic inequity. You want to create a classroom environment that does not replicate systemic inequity. So that's a big piece to include, making sure people's voices are heard, they feel like they're valued, everyone feels like they can take risks and develop their own identity as a learner. So that kind of addresses systemic inequity. In terms of first generation college students, there's a social capital issue. So students may come to class with not really knowing what college is, like I did. Like I said, I found community college. I'm like, oh, this is community college. What is this? What can I get here, right? How can I go to college with this? I didn't know anything. So lacking social capital, you can bring that into spiral in like academic skills or career skills into classroom in ways that dignify students. Like, for instance, bringing in psych services, bringing in an academic counselor, give extra credit for going to these student support services, which many students don't even know what that is. So you have to explain what that is. I offer to my students to write letters of recommendation, for example. So I've written letters of recommendation for jobs, for probation and parole, for immigration, and then also explaining, what that is and why that's useful. Because if your parents didn't go to even high school or college, you may not understand why is that important that the teachers offer me a letter of recommendation. Why is it important that the teacher has taken me after class and said, hey, you know what, I can mentor you a little bit. I have students who are first gen students of color who want to get a PhD. They just feel like they do. And of course that resonates with me. It's like, you have no idea how to get there. You just have this feeling. So I'm like, okay, I can mentor you a bit with that, or I can connect you with someone who can mentor you. It's and the research is clear that, a lot of students of color and first gen students, they don't know how to network or shake the hands of someone who has a doctorate or even get a mentor, even know what that is. So there's that kind of education piece that happens for students who maybe just have different social capital than students who have parents who are already educated. I know one semester a student, I don't know if he's using his phone or whatever, but he wrote me, it came up as an email. It said, hey, darling, truck is broke, not coming to class, right? And I was like, oh, I need to start kind of modeling for students what an email looks like, what a professional academic email looks like. Nothing wrong with that email, nothing wrong with the way people are talking, but in class, it's kind of a professional academic environment. I remember I was taking a summer course before I got a bachelor's degree over at Norwich University, and I swore in class. It's Norwich University, it's a military academy, and I'm like, well, I won't swear, sorry. And so the professor took me aside and he was really nice. He wanted to help get me into that college actually with a scholarship, but I didn't understand that was an opportunity back then. I was still, just coming out of community college, first two classes. But anyway, he said, yeah, you can't say that here. I'm like, oh, okay. But I didn't feel like humiliated or anything. I was just like, oh, that's just how I talk. I still kind of talk like that. I'm a big swearer, and I tell my students that, but in class, don't drop the F-bomb because that's not what this environment is. So it's just a matter of like, yeah, that language is great for whenever you're somewhere else, but right here, this is what works. And so that's like explicitly teaching kind of like, some social and giving students some social capital. Those are just some examples of what you can do to help students.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that one actually, because that's actually something that I've done with my students over the years is I get those emails like that and it's written so informally to their math professor, almost as if it were a text message or something.
Yeah.
And so, I'll respond back and say, answer the question and, when we email our professors, it can look something like this. And I just write the same thing, but in the proper format that you would write an email to. And so it is good to hear. It's one of those things where I always wonder, the reason for doing it is to help students, right? And you see those emails like that and that nobody has ever taught them how to write something where you'd be, addressing a teacher or something like that. And so
yeah. Yeah. Why would they know that? That's my research in Mexico, right? So I went to do research in Mexico and in the Yucatec Maya community to look at how they approach math, problem solving in math. And they had these amazing, innovative approaches to solving maths in the community. They had all this expertise that they brought to class, but it was overlooked in the class. So it's important, like, just because students don't talk like in the way that they need to navigate that system, doesn't mean that you can't just drop a few hints and then they can figure that out, because they have a lot of other assets. It's not like they always say they lack social capital. Well, they have social capital. It's just not the social capital that's going to move them up in that environment. In another environment, they blow you out of the water with their social capital. And that's what I noticed in Mexico. These students had amazing math expertise, but wasn't really valued in the math classroom. So we had to think about how we could change things a bit, change some real life tasks that tapped into their lived experience in order to use the social capital that they brought. I mean, those students
Right,
are super extra ultra polite. They they would make us all our schools look bad. So it wasn't a matter of, you know, professional academic behavior, but they just had different social capital that was being overlooked. And same thing in our classroom, if students come with different social capital, and we know that this is the social capital that helps you navigate this system with its traditions, then why not just teach it to everybody? And I kind of like just give an example to everybody, so it's not like it's for any particular person, and, you know, so they can go, oh, in this environment, oh, this is how they will want me to talk in order for me to get the things I want.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Cool. So before we go, you have a book coming up. Yes? A second book that you're working on. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, wait, I'm going to show you first. This is my Teachin It.
Oh, yes.
In case you guys wanted to buy this. And I have a website, FeliciaDarling.com, and it has information about my new book and the old book. I don't know if it's the old book, it's still selling, but the new book's called The Ripple Effect, Becoming the Change We All Need. And it's a book where I interview like therapists. It's some of my story there, and some of other people's stories. And it's not just a self-help book. It's like a self-help book that helps you, but helps the world, right? So you some practical ideas and some research around healing past hurts, maybe healing trauma, and also exploring implicit bias so that you can transcend some of your own limiting beliefs about yourself and others, but you can also heal past hurt. So you're kind of more present in the moment. And so the idea is, obviously the world is got some issues and we don't want to contribute to that. We want to make things better. And so this is kind of a practical book that with some activities you can try. In fact, I have a really good, I really like it. I made it up, and it's called Little Points of Light Body Scan, and it's based on a lot of trauma therapy where you build on a place that's very resourced. But if you can try it out, if people really like it, it's called Little Points of Light Body Scan. It's on my website under Humane Resources, and it's worth trying it just to make you feel good. If you never buy the book, you'll feel good after doing that. It's just a really great body scan. But anyway, yeah, and Fred Luskin, who wrote Forgive for Good, is going to write the foreword for the book. I'm so happy. Cool. Yeah, he's such a role model of mine. I met him in Stanford like 10 years ago when I was a student. Super brilliant guy. He runs the compassion. Oh gosh, is it called the Forgiveness and Compassion Institute at Stanford? I know that's wrong, but it's something like that.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Very cool.
I just think of him as the forgiveness king and the compassion king. So I don't know. He probably would hate that title. He's so humble, but yeah, I'm kind of excited about that, and I'm trying to write that during the pandemic. And as you may have not noticed, we have a pandemic. It's a great chance for people to kind of resolve some of our past issues, because many of us, you don't look like you've gotten fat. I've gotten fat. I've gained 10 pounds. We're all reaching for these coping mechanisms.
It's called the COVID-19, right? Definitely.
Yeah, COVID-15. Yeah, or 19. Yeah, and I feel like it's a perfect time to resolve some of those issues, because otherwise we're just going to get fat, right? There's a lot of stress, a lot of background stress right now, and the more we resolve in our past, the less background stress we have, and the better coping mechanisms we have. If you're not better at navigating uncertainty after this time period, I don't know what to say, because it's prime for building those skills. That's
definitely
for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it sounds like, gosh, that will be such a good book for us, especially during this particular moment in history.
I know.
Well, I can't wait to read it when it comes out.
Yeah, good. Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining me today on here. It was fascinating listening to you and hearing all of your strategies and advice. I knew you would be a huge wealth of information just based on how incredible your book is.
Thanks. It was nice meeting you. I love the work that you're doing. I love your book. I love that you're getting out there with podcasts and live Facebook videos. It's a great idea.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And thank you for those of you who are joining us live today or watching on the replay. The podcast will be up soon on October 25th. So I hope you will listen there as well. All right. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye, Alice.